This meeting is being live streamed.
Let me turn my camera around.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy House Talk pregame Saturday. We're back. And let me just go ahead and tell y'all right now, Ronnie is acting a fool. I just had to put him in timeout because
when I'm sick, I'm a little silly. So I apologize.
He was that kid, y'all. He was that kid that every time class started in kindergarten, the teacher was like, "Oh, I wish this boy would be sick today."
I was the life of my classroom. When I walked in, the teacher used to smile like, "Yes, my star student walked in."
I don't believe that.
I was a teacher. I learned early on the art of the game. I learned how to finesse early on. My dad taught me that if you're nice to your teachers and the lunch lady, that extra point when you got a 69 and you need a 70, or you ain't got the full $1.75 for lunch, you got $1.50 and the lunch lady still give you that lunch because you was nice all year. Kids, if you out there listening, y'all keep disrespecting y'all teachers. When y'all got that 68, 69 on that and you need a C, all right. We'll learn one day. Welcome back, everybody. How's everybody doing today? This is House Talk Pregame, episode 127. Welcome. We are back, and we also have a returning guest to the show, Miss Courtney Mendenhall. Courtney, welcome back. How are you this morning?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing really well.
Awesome. We're glad to have you back today. We got a really good topic to go over today. We're talking about sports communication and the failure to communicate in sports. Regardless of the sport, if it's an individual sport or team sport, one of the most important foundations of any successful athlete is communication. Being able to work through the good times and the bad times, but also the learning lessons as well. If you cannot learn how to communicate with your teammates, with your coaches, with your trainers and things like that, then more times than not, you will struggle, to really reach your fullest potential. But if you can learn the art of communication, if you can really learn what it means to communicate in an individual sport with your trainers and your coaches, but also in a team sport with your teammates, your position group, and things like that, more than likely, yes, your chances of success and reaching your ultimate goals will happen. So we're going to talk about some of those things, what you can do, what are some things to look out for, and how you can really improve your communication overall as an athlete, as a coach, as parents, family, friends, and all that. So looking forward to getting to that topic. Dr. Pitts, did you have any mental health tips of the week this week?
You know what? I'm going to give one, and we're going to talk about it more as the show goes on. But when we talk about communication, I think one of the most important skills that any of us can learn is to learn how to talk so that other people will listen, and to learn how to listen so that other people will talk. Because I think that the piece of the puzzle that people overlook is that, and we say it all the time, right? Athletes are human beings. So it's not like you get to high school or you get to college or you get to the pros and then all of a sudden you become a communicator. No, how you learn to communicate in life, period, is going to be indicative of how you communicate in your sport. So if you can't communicate effectively in life outside of athletic performance, how can people expect you to be an effective communicator within the context of your athletic role? So I think that that's something that we really have to make sure that we tease out today, because it's one of my pet peeves. It bugs me to see a microphone in somebody's face and they can't speak. It drives me nuts. And I think that people need to take the importance of effective communication so much more seriously with this understanding. We must speak to be understood rather than speaking to be heard. And we must listen to understand rather than listening to respond. You say it all the time. There's a reason why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listening is one of the key ingredients to effective communication. And so many people just, I think, don't understand the importance of that. And hence why we see so many miscues, both in our personal lives and in the athletic arena.
Absolutely. And I think, also too, and I think something that we should definitely highlight in our conversation today is when there's a breakdown in communication in critical sports moments. To give a famous example, for those who are familiar with Michigan's Fab Five back in the 90s, they had Jalen Rose, Chris Webber, and a couple other people. Phenomenal team. Got down to the national championship game, and it was the infamous ghost timeout call where Chris Webber thought they had a timeout left. He went over to the corner, called a timeout, and because there was a lack of communication in that moment leading up to that play, they lost the turnover and ended up losing the game. So when we talk about, really communicating in sports, it's not only just in practice and film study and things like that, but it's also in the heat of the battle. And, whether it's at halftime, whether it's a timeout call in the fourth quarter, whatever the case may be, those moments of communication from the players to the coaches, having an understanding, but also being present in the moment and not breaking down themselves is really important. We'll get into that in a second. Appreciate the mental health tip of the week, Dr. Pitts. I'm trying to think, was there anything going on in the sports world that I could think of that would be relevant to today's conversation?
Other than the Celtics losing to the Heat?
Well, I mean, hey, you know what? I made this comparison a couple of days ago when I was watching Game 1 of Denver and Miami. I think it's going to be a phenomenal series. I think Miami will get one game at least, but Denver is just, I mean, when you watch Denver play in terms of communication.
Game 1 was last night, right?
No, Thursday night.
Thursday, okay.
Thursday night. In terms of communication and things like that, watching them play on offense on Thursday night was a masterclass in basketball. And for those who didn't get a chance to watch Game 1, please tune in tomorrow evening and watch Game 2 because Denver's competing at a level right now where they're firing on all cylinders. The effort, the communication, the consistency, they're firing on all cylinders. But even in the midst of that, when they zoom into the timeout calls and stuff like that, their coach Mike Malone doing a phenomenal job of communicating, also reassuring and letting them know, like, hey, remain consistent, play our style, play our game, things will work out. And so far in Game 1, it did. So I'm trying to think. I also saw. I'm pretty sure your husband would like this. I saw an article yesterday where it was saying that apparently last offseason Russell Wilson was a done deal to go to Philly. They had a trade package for Seattle to Philly for Russell Wilson to go, and he turned it down
as a backup.
No, to start. It was gonna. I was assuming. Yeah, I saw it yesterday on Twitter. They had a trade package that was a done deal to get Russell Wilson as their quarterback, and he turned the deal down.
What?
Yeah.
That don't even sound right.
I mean, well, it really, if there was one team it worked out for, it was the Eagles, because, they saw that Jalen Hurts was, who we thought he was. But, let's be real. If you go back last offseason, before this season even happened, if you had to say Russell Wilson or Jalen Hurts, I think all of us would be like, okay, I'm taking Russell Wilson. Jalen Hurts, cool. But I can get Russell Wilson in year 10, and I know he got another solid 10 in him if he wants to.
Yeah.
So, but worked out for Philly, worked out in that instance. They didn't have to worry about doing that. But
we're gonna see how Russell does with Sean Payton as a coach. I'm looking forward to seeing how that's gonna play out, because I'm like, eek.
Right.
Yeah, that will be pretty interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that'll be a good shakeup. I think, and also too, I think it's not really talked about a lot in terms of Russell Wilson, but I think in terms of communication, we saw. I think I saw an article, and I think I shared it with you, Dr. Pitts. I think back in January, there was an article that came out that kind of talked about the behind the scenes of Russell Wilson and some of his struggles during this past season. More so, was he struggling physically and mentally on the field? Yeah. But it also kind of goes back to when we talked about his team that he had off the field. His, I want to say it was like his sports psychologist or somebody like that had been in his corner since he was in college, and ended up passing away at the end of last season, not this past season, 2 seasons ago, ended up passing at the end of 2 seasons ago. And so last year was Russell's first season without having that person in his corner who was kind of able to be his equilibrium for, being able to balance out, the jitters, the thoughts, all the things that go into preparing for a game and stuff like that. He didn't have that person. He didn't have that part of his communication team.
His anchor, his mental health anchor.
Right. So, this was his first season really adjusting, to a new team, new area, but also not having somebody who was, really pivotal in his corner. So really looking forward to see how he bounces back this year, and things like that. But I think and also we saw with Ja Morant too. Ja Morant, the commissioner came out a couple of days ago and said they're going to announce his suspension after the NBA Finals. I truly think he's going to get somewhere between 20 and 30 games. And for those who didn't listen to my rant last week, it's kind of like, I hate to see this happen to him, because it's like he's a phenomenal talent. I think he probably phenomenal dude personally. I don't know him, but it's either you learn this lesson now or you crash out and you lose your career, and then you have to go find and do something else. And we'd hate to see that, but hopefully he can learn this lesson. Don't know how long they're gonna suspend him for. I think it's gonna be between 20 and 30 games. But we'll see. You ready to say something, Dr. Pitts?
No. I thought Courtney was gonna say something.
Oh. Oh no. Well, so I don't have any other sports news that's relevant to my knowledge. It was kind of an uneventful week outside of the finals this week. So let's dive right on into this topic. I think this is a really important topic. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier in the season. I can't really remember. I think we did have a topic kind of centered around communication in sports, but it's always important, whether it's sports or life in general. Communication is one of the pillars of the society. Being able to communicate effectively, but also being able to communicate with a purpose and also solutions as well. And when we talk about sports, having communication, especially with the team, and one of the questions I had wrote down, and I wanted to ask both of you all, kind of like as a little scenario thing when we talk about communication. I was thinking of different scenarios in which communication is really important. So I have one for y'all if y'all want to kind of flesh it out. It says, if a basketball team was leading or trailing by a few points at halftime, what do you think would be the best thing for a coach to say to them? And I think that's, I know that's kind of a very specific scenario, but Dr. Pitts, I'll start with you. If you were a coach.
I want to go first. Let Courtney go first.
You sure?
Yeah, go for it. You go.
And Courtney, I know you have experience with being a coach. And,
Courtney coaches. Don't put it on me. I don't want that pressure on my life.
So Courtney, instead of basketball, let's kind of switch it to softball. And when you were a coach of softball and things like that, and let's say you're going into softball plays 7 innings, right?
It's a spotter right here. I'm sorry, I have to kill it.
Oh, you good?
I'm good now.
I think softball 7 innings, correct?
It's 5, but then it goes to 7 if the score is close. I think that's how it goes.
Okay, so let's say you're going into the 5th inning, y'all are down by 2 runs. What are some of the things that you found to be helpful when working with high school athletes and also collegiate athletes, and being able to communicate through those moments of being down, or even let's say you're up by a lot. Let's say after the first inning, you just had a really good first inning and y'all are up by 4 or 5. How do you also maybe talk about, keeping consistent with that as well?
Okay, well, first, the coach themselves have to have a plan. They have to be willing to communicate what they want to do and what they're going to execute, because everybody has to be on the same page. Mm-hmm. I've had instances where we were down and we came back, and sometimes we won, sometimes we didn't. Mm-hmm. It gets frustrating sometimes if you play and you play hard and you don't win, but it's kind of just like how I've been teaching my kids with mentoring right now. Mm-hmm. It's stressing the importance to them of telling them, don't wait until the end of the school year to try to bring your grades up, because you're going to overwhelm yourself. So it's the same thing with softball and any other sport. You want to make sure that you start right off the bat, so you're not stressing out and trying to play catch up later on, because once you try to do that, you're going to get frustrated, and then some other teammates might get frustrated, and then it'll be a big issue. As far as being ahead in a game and, you have a couple of innings left, I think that it's important for the coach to tell the players, hey, we are in the lead right now, but you got to stay focused. You can't let up. You got to finish strong. You got to keep going, and tell them not to get satisfied. I had a volleyball coach that when I was in 8th grade, that's what he used to tell us. because we won a few games, and he was like, y'all are satisfied. And we didn't quite see it at first, and we were like, but we're doing okay. But he told us we were satisfied because we had won a few games, and we just wanted to come out there and just underestimate our opponents. So he literally told us, like, you have to treat every opponent the same, whether they're better or not. You have to play hard every game, and you have to work as a unit and communicate with each other. I think that that's very important, because I was telling a class that I spoke to at the University of Kentucky a couple of weeks ago that although sports administration and things like that, they put an emphasis on marketing, the psychology part, the legal representation. I think that the communication part is just as important, because it's the backbone. Without communication, you can't really have anything. You have to know how to communicate, as Dr. Pitt said before.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Courtney. When you were speaking, it kind of made me think about a situation that I found myself in college. My senior year, we were playing St. Augs, well, St. Augustine's, for those who are not familiar with St. Augs.
HBCU, yep.
Yep. We were playing them, and no offense to St. Augs, no offense at all, but they weren't that good that season, right? Weren't that good. I think by the time we played them, I think they had only won one game to that point. So first half, we go out there, and I mean, we just slammed the door shut on them. Like, I think it was 35-7 at halftime.
Oh, wow.
My senior year, we only had 8 offensive linemen going into the season, which, for those who don't know, that's not a lot of linemen. You got 5 starting linemen, and then we had 3 backups for the entire season. It's not a lot of people. So going into the second half, our coach was like, look, we go out there, we stop them because they went on offense first. We go out there and stop them. We'll rest some of the starters on offense and everything. We'll put some of the backups in, and we'll just go and mail it in. So sure enough, they go out there, they don't score. We get the ball, we go down the field, we get a touchdown. So now it's 42-7. So I'm in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm about to go sit on the sideline and enjoy this last few minutes of this game, keep it pushing. Now, mind you, this is maybe like 10 minutes left in the third quarter. So next possession, they get the ball, they punt it. Now they have a freak accident injury on one of their players. So the game stopped for about 30 minutes. They had to bring the ambulance out there and all of that. Really unfortunate event and everything. And during that time, mind you, everybody's taking a knee and everything. But on our sideline, we're all like, we're talking about what we're doing after the game, who having a party, who house, we're going to and whatnot. Like, at this point, we are just completely unfocused on the game. So the game starts back up, and our second team offense is out there. In 3 possessions, our second team offense threw a pick and had 2 fumbles that were turnovers.
Oh my God.
By the end of the third quarter, it was no longer 42-7, it was 42-28. And so our coach was like, y'all got to go back in the game. And now, mind you, we sat the rest of the third quarter, had a 30-minute intermission in there already. So in totality, the starters on offense sat for about an hour in real time. We cold, ain't warmed up or nothing, but you had to go back out there. So mind you, here's where the breakdown of communication started. So mind you, we didn't want to go back out there. We thought we had the game in hand. So now all of us are kind of like, oh, here we go and all that. So now our coach is pissed off because we done gave up this lead. So as a result, you got an entire team of unfocused people, an entire team of who are just trying to get through the game. And so we got, little spats over here between the offensive line. We got the quarterback and the coach arguing and stuff like that, because it's just discombobulated at this point. They end up scoring another touchdown. We threw another pick. They end up scoring another touchdown. It's 42-35. Now, we were able to get out of that game alive. We ended up winning 42-38. And I'll never forget it. And Courtney, I don't know if you've ever done this as a coach, but there's not too many times when you win a game and you just felt like you lost.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that before.
And I always tell people, like, when you win a game and you felt like you lost, that's a terrible feeling, because your coaches just look at you like, y'all just don't get it. Y'all just don't understand. And, to your point, Courtney, when you kind of, get lackadaisical, when you kind of start forgetting your principles and start forgetting what your role is and things like that, and also that communication starts to break down. Part of that game, too, was when we brought our second string quarterback in there. After he threw the first pick, his mind was gone. Like, his mind was just scattered everywhere. So, we were trying to talk to him, trying to calm him down and stuff like that. but he was a freshman. He was just, deer in headlights. And so we're trying to talk to him. It's going through one ear and out the other. Like, hey, bro, you good? You've been here before. Like, you got this. Like, bro, just play football. It's football at the end of the day. And, so that part didn't necessarily work out, but we got out of that game. The lesson we learned from that is kind of like Courtney said, you can't take your foot off the gas at any point, because even in college, even terrible college teams, they're still a college team. Those players are still, some of those players are still scholarship players. Some of those players are still really good. So you just can't assume that because a team isn't good, that they don't have individuals that can make plays here and there. And next thing you find yourself in a dogfight with a team you're never supposed to be with. So I'm not going to tell you what we did the next day in practice because it would just be inhumane. But, so a lot of lessons were learned in that moment. So I think also too, to your point, Courtney, when we talk about effective communication from a coach to players, having a purpose and content in your message, having a reason for your message, having a reason for why you do what you do as a coach. And I think also too, being consistent in how you communicate with your players. And I always tell coaches this: if you're gonna be the hardball coach, the a-hole coach and stuff like that, keep that same energy. Like if that's what you want to be that. Because if you are hard one day and then you're lean the next day, that sends mixed messages. That sends mixed communications amongst your players. And we've talked about that before, where I've had coaches who, when certain people are around, they act a certain way, but when it's just us and the players, everything goes. But that doesn't build trust and loyalty in your players and your teammates. What it does is just builds resentment. It's just like, man, this coach don't know what he's talking about. We ain't listening to him. Next thing you know, you got coach loses his job, players lose their scholarships, and now you have to start all over.
That's a good point.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I definitely think that there's a way that you can balance that, because when I first started coaching, I said that I wasn't going to be that coach that just yelled. And then I've had some people to say, why don't you yell more? Then I've had some people to say, I like the way that you coach now. I don't think you need to yell. I've had instances where I would have to yell to put my point across, and they just looked at me like, I'm like, yes, I said that. Don't take it personally, but listen to what I'm telling you,
Right.
And they understood it once they followed through with what I told them. And I told them, it's nothing personal out here. I want to make sure that you perform your best and we work as a unit. With the girls that I coach now, they're learning, this is their first year playing. So they have to learn how to throw it to first base. So I'm not out there, getting on them constantly, and yelling at them and putting them down. I'm encouraging them to get routines and repetition in their head so they can know where the plays are and things like that. But I mean, as an athlete, I was yelled at and I took it very well. And I told myself that when I became a coach that, I would adopt some of the things that my coaches did with me. I would change some of the things that they did so I could have my own style, and it works. I have times where I don't yell to just give constructive criticism, but I yell in excitement too. So the fact that when I'm yelling, I'm like, yeah, like I'm pumped up. They don't take it when I yell at them in the other way personally, because they see that I'm just very passionate. So I think there's a way you can balance that out.
I definitely was a yeller as a coach. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Pitts.
No, a couple of key things that I wanted to touch on that you both said it as you were speaking. If I sort of put it under an umbrella, I think it's about the head game, right? And recognizing that whether you're ahead or you're behind at halftime, it's where's your head at? Where is your head at, and is your head in the game? And as you were both speaking, I was writing down some notable moments in sports that I think about when this types of conversation comes up. And the first one is, I want to say it was the 88-89 football season. It was.
I won't even around.
Yeah, don't
at
do
that
that.
point. You want to go
Me
back to a
either.
time I'm not even here.
Let's
Like,
go. Let's go.
I was still swimming, but I'm,
So you hear me talk all the time on the show that I'm not a trash talker. And even back in the day when I did talk a little bit of trash, I was never like an obnoxious trash talker. But the reason why I don't talk trash ever anymore is because of that football season. It was the William and Mary tribe against the University of Delaware Blue Hens. And exactly what we're talking about happened. William and Mary was taking it to UD's butt. You hear me? They were beating the brakes off of them. And one of my closest friends at the time was at UD. She was attending UD. My son's father was playing for William and Mary. When I say we were lighting them up, we were lighting them up. Just like you said, whatever that talk was that happened in the locker room at halftime, they came back and they marched back into the game and they beat William and Mary with 11 seconds left on the clock. And it was, I could have gone underneath of the bleachers and buried myself in a freaking hole. And I tell people that game is why I stopped talking trash, because it was in that moment that I realized, and unless there is, unless when you're approaching the clock hitting 0 in football at the fourth quarter, you better shut up. Yeah. Because it can happen, it does happen, and everybody know I'm a Cowboys fan. And if they're, Jesus, we have blown so many leads, it's not even funny. And I don't believe that it's about performance. I believe that it's about the mental aspect of it. Because if the opponent can get in your daggone head,
exactly,
they got you. The other thing that came to mind is I remember, because y'all know how I feel about Tom Brady, to scratch my eyes out. And it was the 2016-2017 season, Falcons, Patriots. And I got friends that are diehard Falcons fans. I got friends that are diehard Patriots fans. And when I say I was so sick of the Patriots that I was like, I'm not watching the Super Bowl. And I watched every Super Bowl, since I was a little kid. I was like, I'm not watching the Super Bowl. And I remember it like it was yesterday, because my now husband was living in North Carolina at the time. I was living in Florida at the time. And he calls and was like, babe, what are you doing? I was watching Law and Order. He was like, babe, are you really not watching the Super Bowl? He was like, babe, it's halftime. And oh my gosh, the Falcons are taking it to the Patriots. I said, the Patriots are going to win that game. He was like, babe, no, they're not. Like, Tom Brady's mismatch, and, Ryan. I said, the Patriots are going to win that game. He said, babe, I'm telling you, just trust me on this one. Turn the game on. You're going to owe me your life if I turn this clucking game on. And if I was make this game, I was telling you I was mad for 2 weeks, because I was like, I told you they were going to blow that game. I told you. But what is Bill Belichick's philosophy? Exactly what you said, Courtney. He is a put your foot on the snake's neck. He is the king of run it up. He buries teams. When Tom Brady was still, he buries them. And people argue, that's not sportsmanlike to say anything. No, bro. You come on this field, this court, this baseball, play to win.
Exactly.
Play to win. You are here to win championships. Can I go on a 2-minute rant?
Of course. I love it.
Let me just tell you something that happened to me a couple weeks ago. And Ronnie, you'll be like, oh, I can see that happen. I had made this here good phone call because Dr. Pitts was about to buy my Dallas Cowboys season tickets. Schedule the appointment. Sales rep is supposed to call me. I rearranged Ronnie clowns all the time that I have 500 sessions a day. I rearranged my schedule so that I could have this good conversation and get all the information I need to get so that I can purchase my season tickets. Rep don't call me. Well, where they do that at? Okay. But so I call him. Oh, thanks for calling me. I'm so busy. Really? Are you serious? So he goes to tell, and Ronnie, you'll appreciate this because my head popped off. I said, I'm in a moment I sided with you. He's talking, and he gives me the tears, the whole 9 yards. But any team, I don't care who you are, if you ain't never won a Super Bowl, season tickets are not cheap, right? He's going on, and he's in what I call used car salesman mode. I couldn't get in a word in edgewise. And he's talking loud. He's talking loud, and he's talking fast, and he's talking over me. So I was like, okay, I have to put my clinical hat on because this dude is getting on all my nerves at the same time. Like I am triggered. And then, he said he's shooting me emails while he's talking to me. And I'm trying to look at the emails. I'm trying to have a conversation with him. And I'm seeing it here, and I wasn't tripping off the price. You can, for folk that don't know, you can pay outright for season tickets, which are thousands of dollars, regardless of the team. They're thousands of dollars. There's tiers to the tickets that you can get, or you can finance your season tickets. So I'm looking at my options, right? And he's talking a hole in my head, just talking. So he says, well, Dr. Pitts, what section, are you interested in? Trigger number one. So I tell him, and he says, now I'm Dr. Pitts, right? You don't know what type of doctor I am. All you know is that I'm a woman. Oh, by the way, and he's talking like I don't know football. So now strike two.
Oh no, see,
you carrying me.
No.
You carrying me. So you're talking down to me, and you're behaving as if I don't know football. And this is my Dallas Cowboys. So my head is on this, like my head's starting to spin. So I'm like, whoo, gotta get my life together. Where are my coping skills? Coping skills. And then he says, when I tell him where I sit when I go to games, which folk know because I posted it right, I can play quarter on the end zone, right? So he says, oh, well, those tickets outside of the boxes, well, those tickets are the most expensive tickets that we have. And the reason why, there's a wait list for those, and they do come available, but they're the most expensive tickets. So you're going to want to, here he goes, you're going to want to look at the higher levels. Excuse me. Okay. I don't understand what you just said. Well, no, you're going to want to look at the higher levels because those tickets are I said, why would I do that? I'm telling you the seats that I want, but those seats are expensive. I ain't even gonna lie, I didn't cuss because that's a work on for me. I didn't cuss out loud, but I said it to him. I just didn't say it to him out loud. So I'm like, okay, straight through. So I'm sitting here. So he proceeds to tell me that, because I said, and the schedule's right here. So I'm looking at the schedule. I love my team. I love my team. But I also know that my team hasn't won a Super Bowl in 30 years. So he says, I'm not selling, and he's yelling at me. I'm not selling wins and losses. I'm selling an experience. The juicy ones was right here. I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but Jerry Jones is not worried about an experience. Exactly. He's worried about a Lombardi.
That's
and
right.
You're asking me, you're insinuating that because I don't want to spend the price of an automobile to get season tickets. I said, we had a window last season to take it to the house. We didn't do that. Then he proceeds to tell me that other than the Kansas City Chiefs, we're the only team in the league that have had back-to-back 12-5 seasons. I said, that's not flying. You clearly don't know who you're talking about or who you're talking to, because we come just like all the other 31 teams. We come into the season wanting to get a Lombardi. I don't even give a rat's behind about winning the division. So what, you won the division? You haven't gotten the Lombardi in 30 years. There are some teams that haven't won a Lombardi. So now mind you, and I'm talking in my inside voice. He's talking about selling an experience to this and the other. And I said, well, I'm all for an experience in the seats where I want to sit. And looking at this schedule, I haven't decided which games I want to spend thousands of dollars for them seats where I normally sit. And I can sit right here and not spend $15 on some nachos, $15 and $14 on a burger, and $200 and some dollars for a parking spot, and a couple $1,000 for some tickets. I can sit right here and be pissed off and turn the TV off. I'm not going to argue with you. So I called him by his name, and he was yelling 3 times. I said his name. What? Oh, did he just say what to me? I said, you have a nice day.
Wow. Dr. Pitts, I'm not trying to interrupt, but there was something that crossed my mind while you were talking about that situation. When I was in my undergrad years, I was taking a communication theory class, and we did a lot of observations and analysis about how women and men communicate differently. And I think to tie this into what we're talking about today, when it comes to winning and things like that, men and women communicate differently. But the thing is, when a woman communicates that she wants to win, she's looked at differently because they're like, well, you should just want to have fun. And then a guy is always expected to want to win, but women are just as passionate. That's what I got from what you just said. You know, you can't have somebody else to tell you about your team because you've been a fan for so long.
Right. And that was the thing, because I'm like, because then my hood self came forth, and I was like, bro, I've been a Dallas Cowboys fan since I was 3, before you was born, before your mom and dad. Like, are you kidding me? And you're gonna question? So that was strike 4. Now you don't question my fandom, because I know. Like, let's keep it real. Am I a diehard fan? Yeah, but every single solitary fan that is in that stadium is not going for a freaking experience. We're going for a win.
Exactly.
We are going for a win. We are going for a win. We are going for a win. And when teams lose, people act crazy. That's why you can't look. That's why you gotta be careful if you ever go to Philadelphia and the Eagles are losing a game.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah, the Philly fans is real.
They are.
Look now, and it's not as football, basketball, baseball. Philly fans will hurt you if they're losing and you talk SH to them. Folk will get all the cops are at the lake every home game in Philly. You can rub jewelry store, gas station, rub whatever you want in Philly. When the Eagles are playing at home, because the cops are at the stadium. So I just wanted to share that, because it was a breakdown in communication. It was insulting. It was offensive. It was not a way to make a sale. And my brain was like, does executive leadership know that the way that you're trying to close a sale is by insulting the customer and challenge the mere fact that someone made an inquiry about season tickets speaks volumes. But it was just crazy. And I'm like, you know what? I was made for a week, because you cut me, win, lose, or draw. And I've said that for years, 30 years. I said, win, lose, or draw. If you cut me, I'm bleeding blue and silver. And my high school team is blue and white. So when you cut me, I bleed blue and white with sprinkles of silver. So you can't. Okay, I'm done. I told you it was rant. I had to get that out because I hadn't shared that.
Thank you for sharing that.
Slap you in the face.
I've experienced stuff like that several times. I've had people tell me, just because I didn't play, I didn't know the X's and O's, and I never played. I never stepped foot on the football field. I don't know how to run a slant. I said, but the thing is, I know what a slant is, and I can probably teach you how to run it.
So, Courtney, I think you made a great point about how men and women, how they communicate through sports. And I think that's a great point. I think, women do get an unfair bias around, like, their competitiveness. I know some females who are just absolute dogs when it comes to competing. I mean, like, I know some talented ass females who, I mean, just like, I don't have an eighth of the time. I think I've shared this with Dr. Pitts before. Me and my sister's younger than me. My sister was a God-given athlete. Like, it used to piss me off so bad how talented she was. I mean, like, she could pick up a sport and would know it the next day. I mean, like, literally would just do it one time and would be great at it. And it used to piss me off because I was the one where, like, I didn't have the athletic talent. I had to learn work ethic. And so while I look good, it's because I had to, really, put the work in. And my sister, on the other hand, she could just wake up, go out on the softball field, and I mean, out-pitch everybody, out-hit everybody, outrun everybody, and it wasn't even close. But she didn't care for it. Like, she was just really good at it. And I used to always tell her, like, if you had half my work ethic, like, if I just had half your talent, we could do something really special. Like, I mean, literally. But so I really agree with that. Now, to you, Dr. Pitts.
Don't say nothing slick.
Now, Dr. Pitts, you have been a clinician longer than me. I would have thought, and you saying that story, you would have recognized, you know, this as clinicians, when somebody tells us their trauma history, right? You know, they share a trauma history with us, no matter how extensive it is. One of the first things we do as clinicians is explore, process, and identify triggers that person should stay away from, just in case they can't say or do something that's appropriate. Now, I think two things can be true.
I was looking for coping schemes. I said I was looking for my coping
I think two things can be true here. I think this person, this sales representative, was trying to foreshadow something to you about this upcoming season. Like, hey, I know you want to sit here. I feel you. I don't know if I would spend this much money to sit here and watch these L's take place this season, because you're gonna be really mad. I'm just saying. Number two, would it be so wrong to say that maybe all they can sell is an experience? Because I was 3 the last time y'all were relevant. I'm 30 now. So, I mean, Dak in his last year, y'all don't have Zeke. You know, CeeDee Lamb is going to drop at least 10 to 12 balls this season. You know, the defense might be really good. We don't know how Micah's going to do. So could he, I'm just saying, maybe his delivery wasn't the most effective manner.
True.
But maybe he's also a disgruntled Cowboys fan who understands that he himself is doing a disservice to the loyal fans of Dallas Nation by being able to have to charge them that much money to watch these L's. That's all I'm saying. So, Dr. Pitts, as a clinician, as your friend, as your surrogate son, as you said, and I appreciate
now you want to be my son. Now you want to be my surrogate son. Moving right along. Next question.
But hold on, time out. Before, I did want to circle back to something you said at the very beginning, though. You did when you talked about, damn, I lost my train of thought now, but you mentioned something when me and Courtney finished talking that I wanted to touch back. Oh, when we were talking about, you know, when leads are, you know, go away and stuff, one of the things we don't really talk about also is the team that's losing that lead. Like you said, it's not necessarily a lack of physical effort, it's more the mental effort.
Yeah.
And I've been on opposite sides. I've been on the side where we come back and win, and just like, it's kind of hard to describe the feeling you get when like you start to build that momentum and you start chipping away at a lead. Like you know my favorite team I used to play against in college was Bowie State. And I kid you not, great example. My freshman and sophomore year, my first 3 years we played Bowie, all 3 games went to overtime. My freshman, sophomore, and junior year, every year we played them, we went to overtime. I just knew when we played against Bowie, it was going overtime. My freshman and sophomore year, going into the fourth quarter, both games, less than 4 minutes left, we were down by 14 points. Both games, my freshman and sophomore year. And I kid you not, when you mount that comeback, when you get that comeback, like, it's not so much like you are saying anything that is like special or magical that just makes the tide turn. It's literally a couple things click in the right place. And then you able to start to get that reassurance, but also too, the same messages that your coaches are preaching to you through your entire game. Stay consistent, do your job, work together. And you finally start to see that happen, and you build that momentum, and it carries you to the win. Now, on the flip side, I've also been on the opposite side too, where we've had a huge lead, and you literally watch that lead just get walked down. And you're all looking at each other like, bro, just do your job. Like, bro, just do your job. And it's like, it's not that nobody's not doing their job any less. It's just watching that momentum shift and having to survive that storm. Courtney,
commentators say that too. They'll say, oh, that play was a momentum shift. That play was a game changer. That play, you can literally, that energy, you can feel it.
Of course.
It's really weird to describe, but like you have to find yourself in that situation to really like grasp the full concept of like that momentum shift. It's such a eerie experience, but it's when you're on the winning side of it, it's dope. When you're on the losing side of it, not as fun. Like
somebody stabbed you in the chest with a sword.
Right. Courtney, you also made a great point too earlier when we were talking about coaches' communication styles and everything. And I had a college coach, Coach Latrell Scott, and he was, as a coach, he was a straight just a-hole. I mean, just like if you ask him a question, like tell me the truth, you were going to get all of the truth, like all 1000% of the truth, no sugarcoat, no cutting it, nothing. It was raw truth. And two things he used to always say. His job as a coach, number one, was to create chaos. Create
Wow.
chaos that could be managed. And what that means is, during a game, you have a game plan. And I always tell people in football, whether it's collegiate or professional, in football, every offense goes into a game with about 10 to 15 plays scripted. We work the entire week, Monday and Tuesday, we watch film, break it down. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the rest of the week, we spend building up our game plan. What are the first 10 to 15 plays we're going to run during the game? Because we watched them, we scouted them, and we think these are the best plays. I can't tell you how many times you go into a game and by play 4 or 5, you have to throw that entire script out because something's happened already in the first quarter. And now you literally just have to work your way through it.
Yeah.
So, but when you find yourself in that position in a game for the first time, I always tell people, if you find yourself in a situation you've never been in before, our bodies will naturally, it's almost like we forget that our brains are like supercomputers. It's almost like if you've never been in that situation before, your brain will scour your entire consciousness to find something similar to that situation. More times than not, if it's a chaotic situation, especially in the middle of a game, your brain doesn't understand context of where the chaos is coming from. It just interprets chaos. So naturally, we go into fight or flight mode.
I was just about to say that. That's exactly what it is.
We are simply reacting to what's happening. In sports, when you are reacting to what's happening as opposed to taking the charge or taking the initiative, you're a step behind. You're a play behind. So our coach used to always tell us, in practice, I have to make practice as controlled and chaotic as possible, because when a game comes about, if this happens, we can't let this catch us off guard.
Exactly. Yeah.
If I allow this to catch us off guard, then I've done a disservice to you as a coach. Number two, and another thing that was really important for us too, and you kind of mentioned it too as well, Courtney, when he would, he would yell, curse, I kid you not, when he would walk in a room, I don't know if you ever seen, like, Dr. Pitts, you used to be a teacher before. When you walk in a classroom full of boys, you almost have to like threaten their life for them to shut up for like 5 seconds. Like, I kid you not, like, you work with any kids, especially boys, you really have to like threaten their life for them to just shut up for 5 seconds. When he would walk in the room, all 80 of us, quiet as a mouse. Like, I'm talking about just like as soon as he walk in the door, we could be having full-blown conversation and it just go quiet. But it wasn't like that on day one. But what happened is he made a very great point, and I say it all the time. When I critique you, when I judge you per se, when I'm coaching you, I'm coaching your effort and your behaviors, not who you are as a man. There's a big difference. And we see this a lot of times, not only in sports, but in life in general. When somebody offers their critique, when somebody offers suggestions, or they offer some type of opinion about what somebody's doing, sometimes it's natural for us, if we're not careful enough, to take it as an insult or take it as an attack on us as a person. Not what I just displayed, in my sport or in life or whatever general. So, for example, if we're doing an inside zone block and I know me and the right guard got to do a double team up to the play side linebacker, and I don't communicate with him and I don't do my job and take my steps, and he's calling me lazy and, sorry and stuff like that, he would make it very clear. I'm not saying you as a person is lazy, but on this play, you were lazy. Your behaviors were lazy. Your effort was lazy. I'm not calling you lazy. There's a big difference. But if kids aren't careful enough, you can simply take one critique from a coach and take it as a personal insult on you as a person. And now you and the coach are at odds because you think every time he talks to you, you think they're attacking you as a person, not your character or your effort. There's a big difference.
Yeah, I had to learn that myself as a person that became a coach, because I had coaches that were hard on me, but their deliveries were different. So I took them differently, but I still tried to maintain the mentality of stability and persistence. But the thing I like that you said was, the coach, when you're in practice, they want to give you all these scenarios. So if they pop up, you know exactly what to do. I've had players before tell me, well, coach, I'm trying, but you keep stopping me every single time I do this or do that. I'm like, well, because you have to know right then and there, because it becomes muscle memory. If you do something, and I tell my players now, my little kids that I coach, if there's a runner on first and second, and the ball gets hit to the third baseman. I tell my third baseman, I always say this before I hit the ball for them to make the play. I say, where is the play? And they say third base. And I tell my third base every time, if you get the ball, tag the bag. They haven't gotten to the point yet where they can turn double plays, but I tell them, you need to know what you need to be doing before the ball gets hit every single time.
Right.
You need to know what's going on, because you could, like you said, you can come up with 10 or 15 plays for a game, but when you're competing, the other team wants to win just as much as you, so they can switch up stuff too, just like that.
Right.
Mhm. Can I add to that? Because I was
Sure.
last week, and you're probably following it too, Courtney. Last week I was watching I think it was the first game against the Texas Longhorns women's softball team and the Tennessee Lady Bolts or whatever they are.
Volunteers.
And, the Volunteers. And the first inning of the game, it's like Tennessee made some mistakes because they exactly what you said. Like the play was at home. I don't know if it was the pitcher or the shortstop that made that play, but overthrew the catcher, and it was like, so I mean, just like that. And it's like, you would think that the coach said what you said. The play is at home. So how do you overthrow your cat? Like it was like the ball was over the catcher's head. It was over the ump's head. I'm like, what are you doing? And then it was the same thing. It was like one of the other plays. I think the play was at first, and it was they look discombobulated. It's like, okay, are you so hyped that? And we hear you guys as coaches say it all the time, right? You got to settle down. It's like you got to settle down, get your head in the game, get the jitters out, because it was like being, watching. It looked like they were just really having a hard time settling themselves down and shaking off those jitters of being in the championship game. And they were making mistakes that it's like, okay, you didn't get here making those mistakes. So you know how to not make those mistakes. You got to get your head in the game. You got to get yourself settled down. Remember, like you said, it's like, you know this. Get
Absolutely.
it together so that you could do what you need to do.
And I think that's
Ronnie,
important.
we're at 11:52, by the way.
Okay, bet. So, so a couple other things that I think that I found that I think are helpful for coaches and also players too. Whether you're the captain of a team or coach or position coach, your delivery. We talked about your delivery is important, and just some kind of I'm gonna run through some tips real quick on delivery things to keep in mind. Number one, avoid asking why questions. Sometimes, especially when you're communicating with younger kids, especially high school, maybe younger kids and stuff like that, when you ask them in the moment why, a lot of times kids will naturally think that their answer has to be the right one that you're looking for. And so they're more focused on, making sure they give you the right answer as opposed to just being honest and telling you what's going through their mind at that point. So I think as coaches, one of the things you can say is like, well, what do you see out there? What was going through your mind during this play? Walk me through what was going on during this situation and things like that, as opposed to why did you do that? Why did you throw the ball there? Why did you run to that? Why did you run that route as opposed to the route we said, and things like that? Because when you ask why, you kind of put them in a corner. So, kind of avoid asking why questions. We've talked about it before. Focus on specific instructions or positive reinforcement. A lot of times, if a team is down at halftime and stuff like that, we'll see coaches sometimes they feel the need to go in the locker room and make all these adjustments and all these changes and stuff like that. And you kind of overwhelm and overload your athletes with whole new responsibilities, a whole new thing to think about going into a second half when they already feel like, I already have to climb this hill to get back even and take the lead. Focus on specific instructions. When you're a coach and you're in the middle of a game and stuff like that, the things you work on in practice, those fundamentals that you work on in practice day in and day out, you have to be able to rely on those things. Like Courtney said, that muscle memory of being able to fall back on what you did in practice, what you did in the off season, what you did in summer camp or spring camp, whatever the case may be. Those moments like that, those critical game moments, is when you fall on your principles. So don't sit there and try to add a whole bunch of new stuff. Positive reinforcement, positive reassurance that, hey, you're made for this. You're built for this. Like we said, the moment should not be too big for you. You worked hard for this. Don't doubt yourself. Don't question yourself. You did this for a reason. We talked about it all season. when you do what you're supposed to do, when you play your role, when you do your job and you communicate, you get to places like this. So don't let it catch you off guard. Give corrective feedback only if athletes are able to make changes right away. We talked about that before. During a game, if you see a player messing up or they don't understand the assignment, it does no good to, just chastise them during the middle of the game, because then you possibly lose them. And if you lose their mind during the game, you have a liability out there on the field. So if you see mistakes that are being made, when they come off to the sideline, hey, walk them over there, talk to them, coach them up and stuff like that. After the game, when you can watch film and stuff like that and really give a breakdown of what you're expecting and what you're seeing out there, that's when you really coach and critique players and really help build them back up on what you're expecting. During the game, I've seen a lot of times where coaches will sit there and just like chew a person out, and now that person is gone mentally because now they're so focused on not messing up, not, getting in trouble, that they lose their whole focus on what the job is during that time. Go ahead, Dr. Pitts.
Courtney, I have a question for you, and I don't, forgive me for not knowing the answer to this. So we know in football the games are filmed, in basketball the games are filmed. Are your softball games filmed? And if not, how do you address those issues that
question.
would be pointed out to players in film?
That's a good question. To be honest, I'm glad that softball is becoming more popular again, because they did take it out of the Olympics a little while back, and it's just now returning.
It'll
So
be back
I
next year,
think,
I think.
yeah. So it's not definitely. I would say the Little League World Series for the girls are televised. As far as film goes, we don't usually do film. When I coached at the college, we didn't do film. I sort of made notes as the game was going on to know what I need to address when we go and practice, because not to sound like a critic, but softball, I think, is underfunded in a lot of ways in different places. So they don't really pay attention to the fact that you need to have film in softball. They think it's just catching and throwing and running to the base, but it's a lot more than that, So the fact that they're bringing it back, I think that there are strides being made towards doing that. As I wanted to also add this to what you asked me, because I'm coaching a 10U fast pitch team, and we're the only team for Parks and Rec this year because they're just now bringing it back to the city of Danville. Now, when I was a kid, I played City League, but I had to play out in the county 2 years because there weren't enough participants. So they're just now bringing it back. So I'm hoping that in the future that they continue to build it and it goes up from here.
Word. I see. Y'all are trying to get a casino down there too in Danville, ain't y'all? Or got a casino already?
It's a temporary one here, and it's the permanent one isn't just finished just yet. So it's gonna be really busy here.
Danville gonna be booming. And so my last kind of tidbit, and I think this is extremely important too, is as coaches and also teammates, is understanding the cultural differences amongst your teammates and your team as a whole. And I'm not just talking about color or religion and things like that. And Courtney, I think you can touch on this a little bit too. The generational differences in how we talk to people and how we communicate. I always say, these Gen Zers and everything, a lot of them, need a little tough love and everything, if you understand what I'm saying. But you have to be mindful that, how can I say this in a nice way without sounding condescending or contradictory? Yelling or being I don't want to call this new generation of kids soft or sensitive or anything like that. But I do think coaches have to be more creative in how they get their players motivated to do better. It can't be where you just yell at a player, cuss them out, embarrass them, things like that, and they take that anger, go out in the field, and now they're doing what you want them to do. That might work for some kids, but it doesn't work for a lot of them, and it definitely doesn't work for a lot of them nowadays. So I think coaches have to be very mindful of how they communicate with kids who might not come from their specific culture. There's a lot of coaches out here nowadays who still have that old school mentality where you have to be, condescending, you have to be yelling at them and cursing and stuff like that. And that isn't necessarily always effective. But also too, yes, if you have players who have religious differences or they come from a different background and stuff like that, you as a coach, but also the team as a whole, have to be able to understand, how can I communicate to this person and be able to be effective? A great example of this, and we see this all the time, is in baseball. especially when you get to the major leagues. If you've ever watched a major league game and when they do interviews, I don't know the specific numbers, but a majority of the star players in baseball are from different countries.
Yes.
The Angels pitcher and hitter Otani, I can't think of his first name, but Otani, he's from Japan. He can speak a little bit of English, but when they interview him, they have an interpreter right there, and he's translating and whatnot. But also too amongst the team, I wonder what parameter they put in place to make that communication gap, not as big, but also how they can communicate during the games and stuff like that, whether it's with hand signals, sign language, or does his teammates take the initiative and learn a little bit of Japanese, and does he continue to learn a little bit more of English to kind of close that gap? But those are the little things right there that equal championship level teams, is being able to bridge some of those gaps and identify what differences we have amongst a team. I always say football is nothing more than a collection of whatever community or town that football team is a part of. So your football team is no more than just a reflection of where you come from. So understanding that all the differences, whether it's racial, spiritual, whatever the case may be, being able to close all those gaps and be able to everybody have one goal and focus on one goal of winning a championship and being the best team possible is important. And so that was kind of like my last little tidbit of some things to keep in mind when we're, working about communication in sports and things like that. Dr. Pitts, did you have any final tips?
Yeah, well, I do. I have a couple of things that I need to touch on, but I wanted to give space. Courtney, do you have any final tips that you would like to add, or anything that you feel like our coaches, players at any level, or even parents need to know as it relates to effective communication in the world of sports? And then I'll close us out with final tips and things that I want to highlight real quick.
I'm very huge on diversity, and right now I have 2 girls that are Middle Eastern, and I do have, when it comes to my team, mixed races on my team, and they all get along just fine, and I think that being able to embrace each other and understand differences is what the world needs anyway. We're not all meant to be the same. And if we were, we would have been put here like that. And I know that's a cliche, but that's exactly what the world needs. And as a person that is bilingual, I speak Spanish, so I'm very familiar with what Mr. Ransome said about there being players from other countries in baseball. That's part of the reason why I'm working towards, working with baseball players, because I have that ability to speak with them. And I was just telling my boyfriend yesterday that every time I meet somebody that speaks Spanish and they're a native speaker, I always ask, what country are you from? Because I just love to learn about the culture. I love to learn about what they do there and how it's different and what I can take from them, because you never know what you learn from anybody just by, like you mentioned earlier, Dr. Pitts, just listening and not just trying to respond to somebody or just trying to point your finger. So I really think that diversity is very important in all sports, even though, baseball is the most diverse, but in all sports, because that's how you'll bridge those gaps.
Yeah, that's real. So that cultural, thank you for that, Courtney. That cultural piece is so key, whether we're talking about age, gender, race, ethnicity. It's relevant because it informs how the individual is showing up in the world of sports, right? So when you think about the cultural piece, and you're right, when you look at baseball, particularly at the MLB level, there's a lot of Latino presence in them, whether it's the DR or South America or Mexico or Cuba, Spain, Portugal, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of Latino presence in the world of professional baseball. So, and what we know to be true too is some of the dialects are different. So there's so much opportunity there to be able to bridge that gap and to provide that appropriate cultural support in the athletic arena that, certainly I'm sure that considerations are given. You have to be able to communicate in order for the athlete to be effective. The other part of it, though, and Ronnie, you touched on it, where the Gen Z, and this is something that is, it's a hot button for me, because you hear parents say, for example, and I'll connect the dots with this, you hear parents say, oh, well, what is the kid upset about? That you don't, you're just a kid, you don't have any bills, But this is what I say about that cultural nuance in 2023 with this group of kids. it's not just about them being emotionally different. The world, as we know it, is different. Children today are up against far more than children have ever been in the history of mankind. The social media, bullying, the issues around gender and the LGBTQIA plus and all of the conversation that's going on in the sports world around transgender athletes. Is it a safe place for our LGBTQ kids? Like, there's so much more that has to be taken into consideration in understanding how our kids today are showing up in the world of sports. So those traditional, those old school, those antiquated ways of coaching and engaging kids is not the most effective way to go about it, because these kids are navigating far different challenges than kids of yesteryear were. I have parents that I work with and student athletes that I work with that, you know, you've got pitchers that have their own mental health issues that take not striking a player out and walking the bases loaded. They're not handling that well. It's more to that. We're seeing kids at younger ages with eating disorders. We're seeing kids at younger ages with ADHD and ADD, anxiety disorder, depression. It's the stuff that these kids are up against in their life outside of their involvement in sports is taxing their mental health. And that has to be taken seriously, and it has to be taken into consideration. And when you look at the pressure that athletic play puts on these kids, that all that screaming, yelling, hooping, hollering, cussing, and fussing can be the difference between suicide and life. And folks need to get that. And I've said that to my parents. Stop screaming and yelling at your kids. Stop doing that. You need to be an emotionally safe space for these kids to be able to tell you what they're thinking and what they're feeling. I can't tell you how many athletes I work with that feel like a failure because they missed a shot. They feel like a failure because they didn't strike enough players. They feel like a failure because they didn't score or because they fumbled the ball. It's scary. The erosion that the pressure associated with athletic performance is having on the mental health of our young scholar athletes. And we just have to be more serious and pay attention to that. The other thing that I wanted to know, as I want to put a happy birthday out there for our dear friend and colleague, Dr. Brian Maiden. His birthday is Friday, June 9th, so I wanted to show some love to him. Dr. Maiden, we love you. Happy birthday. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful birthday as you prepare to wrap up this semester and go on and be the superstar that he is through the summer. He don't never take a break. Take a vacation, take a day, enjoy your birthday, have a great day. I also want to acknowledge, and I just alluded to it a moment ago, this is Pride Month. And you don't have to agree with the lifestyle choices of our LGBTQ communities because they're different than you. But my charge to you, my call to action to you, our listening and viewing audience, is this: remember humanity. It doesn't make a difference why you see yourself as different than someone that's a member of the LGBTQIA community. At the end of the day, they are all human beings. And at the end of the day, you can agree to disagree, but they deserve to be treated with decency, respect, and common humanity, without judgment, without criticism. You are entitled to your opinion, just like you're entitled to live your life the way you choose to live your life. They're entitled to their opinions, and they're entitled to live their life the way they choose to live their life. Be mindful of that, be sensitive to that, and particularly in the world of sports. Sports has not been a safe place for our LGBTQ community. It has not. And we need to be more mindful of that because it should be a safe space. It should be. I want to thank Amanda Dolan from the Mental Society podcast. She had me on as a guest on the 29th. Great, great, great discussion around sports and mental health. And, you know, she was very candid about some of the challenges that she has parenting young scholar athletes at the high school level, and the concerns that she has about some of these coaching styles that she feels like is having an impact on her kids. So she's a concerned parent, and she's very, very passionate about mental health. So I just wanted to personally thank her. And then on Monday, this coming Monday night, I'm a guest on Garden Views with Jeffrey Littman. Again, having a beautiful opportunity to talk about sports and mental health, and really just raising awareness to this additional support that we need to be providing for our athletes. That's all I had. Great show, great conversation. Thank you everybody for joining us today. We will be back, same bat channel, same bat time next week.
Courtney, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I loved it.
You're gonna come back next season, Court.
Say
Need to
that
see you back
again?
here. I said we need to get you back here next season. We're finalizing the lineup for next season. Got some phenomenal topics, some really great guests confirmed for next season. So definitely have to have you back and keep making your amazing contributions to these discussions, because we need to have them.
Well, thank you for that so much. I enjoyed it. And as I mentioned before, thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation and I learned a lot, and it turned my wheels, and I was able to brainstorm about things that I might want to tweak a little bit, or things I might just want to keep the same while I do my coaching.
Nice. Good stuff.
Well, thank you so much again for joining us. We're looking forward to have you again next season. And anything else, Dr. Pitts? All right. Well, that's episode 127, y'all. Check us back next week, same time, same place. Until then, have a great weekend. We'll see y'all then.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.